Fernando Guerra. Welcome to Loyola Marymount University. Today we're going to have a conversation with Eric Garcetti, council member of the 13th Council District, but also mayoral candidate. Eric, welcome, and welcome to Loyola Marymount University.
Great to be back.
Okay, so there were 42 debates before the primary, at least 42 that I counted. There might have been more, and you might have been debating yourself in the car.
Sometimes.
Okay. And you came and you debated here at Loyola Marymount University, you and the other candidates. And during that time, we asked you to come back for another debate. Yes. And you and Wendy Gruhl both agreed. Why have you not had debates?
You know, we've accepted almost every single debate, so you'll have to ask Ms. Gruhl why some of those have been turned down. I wanted to jump right in the next week with debates.
Well, that might have been too many, but...
Oh, you know, I think at least one a week would have been a good thing to really keep that momentum.
So there are going to be no debates at all?
There's now going to be some. The first one is going to be this Thursday on Channel 7, and I think there's at least 4 or 5 others where we're both going to be at. I've accepted, I think, double that amount, and right now a lot of them I'm showing up to, but nobody else.
Okay, so you came in first.
It'll be a good debate.
Yeah. So she's not here, so you're going to have to debate me.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So you came in first in the primary.
Yes.
Okay. And according to our exit poll that we did here at Loyola Marymount University, which we've done about 8 of them,
yes,
using the very well-established methodology, all 8 of them have been right on, yes, meaning that every single one, unlike other polls, an exit poll, you compare it to reality, the actual results, and we're right on once again. And in that poll, we had we were able to ask different ethnic groups, different geographic groups, etc. A couple of surprising things to me, but first what we expected. She beat you in the Valley, okay?
But not by a lot.
But you're a native of the Valley.
I am.
I mean, what's the deal there? Why do more people in the Valley support her?
I think we're going to win in the Valley in this runoff, and you know, the support of Jan Perry, who picked up pockets and throughout the Valley, Northeast, San Fernando Valley, Kevin James, who did very well in the West Valley. In the latest poll that I saw, we're actually 3 points up in the West Valley, which is traditionally seen as the kind of more conservative part of the Valley. We won 53 precincts on both sides of Ventura Boulevard. So, you know, as a Valley boy, I'm going to fight very hard for the Valley vote. It's very important to me, as are all parts of the city. But I think we're going to win the Valley. I think what we did is we closed a 17-point gap in January. She was winning the Valley by 17 points to about a 3% loss. So that's a 14% gain, and I think that we've only had more momentum since the runoff.
So during a presidential campaign, there are blue states and red states, and then there are kind of purple states in between. Okay, and so oftentimes you know that a Republican is not going to win California. I don't care who they nominated. The Republicans weren't going to win California, yet the Republicans continuously said, no, we're not giving up on California, we're not giving up on Oregon, etc. But you didn't see them campaign here. In the city, it's a little bit different. You don't have to give up in any one particular region, but yet there are regions where you really have some strength and some weakness. What are the regions of the city where you have some strength, and the strength was shown in the primary?
Yeah. Well, if you looked at the areas that I won, received the most votes of any of the candidates, it was kind of this strip that's south of Mulholland Drive, north of South Los Angeles, from Boyle Heights to the ocean. So all the way from east side to the west side, essentially, in the city. But again, there was strengths in the valley, especially in the southern part of the San Fernando Valley and parts of northeast San Fernando Valley. We did well, you know, in other pockets as well. I think we're going to do well in the far south of the city, in the 15th Council District by the harbor and all the way up through Watts. And South LA is up for grabs now. So in some ways, I think that that'll be an area that'll be very important. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we almost have a caricature of what each of these places is. The Valley is only a place where moderate whites live. South LA is only a place where African Americans are. You know, the Port is just all Italians and Slavs. But you know, all of Los Angeles is incredibly diverse. We really do have, you know, we have African Americans who don't just live in South Los Angeles. We have Latinos who live in South Los Angeles. We have, you know, Anglos and Asian Pacific Islanders who are scattered about in West Side next to Oaxacans and folks from other places. So we really look at our vote not just geographically based, in terms of that equaling some sort of ethnicity or some sort of political place on the spectrum. We really think that everybody is up for grabs, and I have a very universal message that I'm going to rebuild neighborhoods, get jobs back no matter where you live, no matter what color you are, no matter what your age is. These are common concerns for LA.
Yeah. so we know kind of the strengths in terms of the geography of the city. Where were your weaknesses? And you have to have some weaknesses, because otherwise you would have won.
No, don't worry, I'm not one of those guys who, what's your biggest weakness? I work too hard, you know. No, I think our weakness is...
You don't work hard?
No, I do work extremely hard. I'm working from 6:30 in the morning to 11:30 at night, but it's not a weakness. I think the areas where the vote is not either Wendy Gruhl's or mine yet, South Los Angeles, an African-American vote is, I think, definitely up for grabs. I think Republicans, now that there's not a Republican in the race, are going to be fertile areas. I don't know. I mean, I think the geography of Los Angeles in terms of the valley is wide open right now. That's probably really one of the main battlegrounds. It's where our headquarters are. But we also have one of our strongest offices in Crenshaw, you know, right across from Leimert Park. So those are two of the main areas. But also one last thing I'd say, it's not so much the areas that we're weak. I think all of us have a weakness in terms of the turnout. It was 20% turnout.
Right.
So it's a weakness of the city.
21%. I want to push it up.
Absolutely. We got 1 more percent.
Right,
excellent. Right. So I joked to someone, we had a political roast that we do every year for the American Diabetes Association. And I said, I came in first. I got 33% of the 16% at the time.
Right.
Of the 40% of the population of the city. That was a landslide. When you actually do the math, that's like 3% of the population.
Right. So
and that counts as a first place finish. So all of us have a lot of work to do to continue to try to get turnout up and really make this a broader electorate.
So as I mentioned, we do an exit poll here at Loyola Marymount University. In that exit poll, it showed you had tremendous strengths amongst the Latino community. Yeah. You got a plurality of the vote, actually very close to a majority of the vote. And what accounts for that? Why so strong in the Latino community?
Well, you know, I've represented Latino district for the last 12 years, you know. I have a mixed ethnicity, but my father's side of the family is from Mexico, and so I speak Spanish. We were on TV on Spanish language, with Spanish language commercials, but I also did a lot of interviews on radio and on television, and we had a really strong field operation in Latino areas. There's been a Latinos for Garcetti group from the beginning that really gets out the vote, and I think those three things combined, message, the mechanics of the field operation, and the money that we were able to spend in those communities really made the difference.
And then another group, Asians. You again had a very good plurality amongst the Asian voters that we polled. Why?
Well, you know, I think it's long relationships. It's a very diverse community, first of all. It's not in any way one community that votes in one way, but I represent historic Filipino town and Thai town. I've had very close ties.
Meaning that they're in the
American.
13th district that you represented for 12 years.
District, exactly. And today they're still in my district. Parts of Koreatown or the northern stretches of Koreatown, and very long ties to Korea. I've spent a lot of time traveling and living in Asia as well, so there's a cultural fluency that I have that I can sit down with a Thai business owner, having lived in Thailand, and we don't start the conversation, tell me about yourself, we can get to the meat of the matter. How are we going to get you a small business loan? How are we going to improve public safety in your neighborhood? And I think there was a real familiarity with me that I've always enjoyed as a council member, and I think that reflected in the vote.
Yeah. And African Americans, there was an article today in the LA Times, you talked about South LA. In our poll, you only received 14% of the African American vote. Obviously, Jan Perry received a majority of that, but Wendy Gruhl received 25%. So, in addition, when we asked in the poll if the runoff were between Eric Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl, she did pretty well with African Americans, almost 3-2. So it seems that she has very much of an advantage there. Why?
Yeah, you know, there's probably maybe like a 10-point advantage or something starting out, but I think we're going to do very well.
No, I think it's 3-2.
3-2. So what does that compute as?
So 60-40.
60-40. So you know, a 20-point gap. So if you close that by 10,
she's got a real good. She's got a very strong. There's a strong gap.
The polling
there.
I've seen that we're tied with African American men, and with African American women we're a little behind. And I think that for me, I'm very proud of the endorsers that I have. The first time that all 3 city council members who are African American have kind of come together in the last year and a half or so was just this Saturday. Herb Wesson, our council president, Jan Perry, who significantly, as the woman who did get that vote, is going to be campaigning very hard. I've got the New Frontier Democratic Club, which is the major Democratic club in South LA for African Americans, LawPAC, which is the Los Angeles African American Women's Political Action Committee, and then, of course, Congresswoman Karen Bass, folks like Isidore Hall, who's an assembly member, and a few others we're about to roll out. I think that that's going to be a very competitive vote. We have the best numbers in terms of our calls that we're making out of our South Los Angeles office. It's overflowing with volunteers. It's right there across the street from Leimert Park. We have great clergy support that we're going to be talking about, a lot of religious leaders in the next week, some who endorsed me this weekend from our AME churches, from our Baptist churches, and they really can help get the vote out. Right now, we're seeing that a lot of African Americans are kind of saying, well, why should I vote for either of you right now? Give me a reason to feel excited. And so I'm returning to my record of jobs, my record of infrastructure, and saying we're going to bring jobs right here in South LA. Let's take this idea of, for instance, of Silicon Beach and build a Silicon South by going along the Crenshaw line and the Expo line and starting tech companies there with high school education programs to teach people computer coding in our local classes. So we have a really good and bold agenda as well as a record that I think is going to excite the community. And lastly, the more people know the role that I've played, for instance, chairing President Obama's campaign here in 2008, that really matters to African Americans. There was a lot of African American leaders, and my opponent, didn't support President Obama. That was a big risk back then. And that was just something that, I felt very compelled to do, and I think that will help.
When you say it was a big risk back then, you mean that she was in the lead, everybody assumed she was going to get the nomination, but Obama came out and you were supporting. But Wendy Gruhl does have the support of Magic Johnson, of Maxine Waters, of Bill Clinton, and a couple of others. So she's been doing quite well there, and she always likes to talk about the fact that she started her public service working for Tom Bradley. And the LA Times, in talking about her when they did that profile, ran that beautiful picture of her and Tom Bradley. And Tom Bradley still resonates in the African American community. If there's any way you can link yourself to Tom Bradley, you're doing a good job.
Absolutely.
So, given all the work that you did for Obama, and you were one of the first ones that actually ever talked to me about Obama. I mean, I knew he was a senator, but I didn't take him seriously. And you were like, no, you got to take this guy seriously. How come he hasn't come out to endorse you?
Well, he's never endorsed with two Democrats. Even Rahm Emanuel, who was his chief of staff when he ran for mayor in Chicago, he didn't endorse him. But there's no question.
So he didn't endorse Emanuel?
He did not. So, I think that's just a difficult thing for a sitting president to do. A former president has more of the luxury to be able to do that. But there's no question that a lot of the Obama team is behind me, is helping out, is volunteering, the same folks that were part of that infrastructure that we did. And even nationwide, I have great support from, the Obama fundraisers and others. And so we'll see that. That record's something I'm very proud of. And it's something that I point to not just for political reasons. As mayor, I have a relationship with this president, a relationship that is close to him and his administration. Last week I was just in Washington, D.C. meeting with Cecilia Munoz, who's the head of Domestic Policy Council.
Right.
And we were talking about immigration reform, how I can make Los Angeles the best in the country for implementing immigration reform when it passes, so that we can queue up our residents to be able to have that path to citizenship, how we can take initiatives on healthcare reform, on gun control and other things. And I want Los Angeles to have that direct line to the White House. It's something that is a difference in this race, and that's important for us.
Well, there's no doubt that you probably have a better relationship than Wendy Gruhl with President Obama, but there's no way that the President of the United States can ignore the mayor of Los Angeles.
No, absolutely not. But it's the difference between being at the front of the line and being somewhere in the mix.
Okay. Endorsements. Yeah. So the primary election was March 5th, okay? Today we are in April, 6 weeks to go before the election. Right. Exactly 6 weeks.
42 days, but who's counting?
42 days, six weeks, okay? So what have you been doing between the end of the primary and right now? What does a candidate for mayor of LA do during that first phase of the runoff?
Well, everybody asked, did you take a day off? And absolutely not. I mean, we kept our foot on the pedal. We kept our foot on the gas straight through. I've been working, as I mentioned, probably from 6:30 to 11:30 every night, every day, just straight through, every day. And it's been exciting. I mean, first of all, you have to raise money again because you start with zero in the bank. You can't carry any money over. And you have to raise in 10 weeks what you raised in a year and a half. It's really an interesting thing.
So what's the budget? How much do you intend to raise?
You got to try to raise the same amount. We raised a little bit over $5 million, and that's our goal again. But it's immensely difficult to do that in just 10 weeks' time. And it's something to consider in the future. How much time do we want our candidates just to be raising money?
So number one, a lot of fundraising is what you've been doing.
But second, then you begin to consolidate support. So I'm very proud that Emmanuel Pleites, who came in 5th place, Jan Perry in 4th place, and Kevin James, who came in 3rd place, all endorsed me. That's never happened, and you probably know even further back, but in any mayor's race I've ever seen, usually the other opponents will split between the two people who make the runoff. That spoke volumes. These were people who were at those 42 debates.
What was the conversation you had with Kevin James about endorsing you?
I said, I want your support. I said, I enjoyed a lot of things that you said. He brought up, the nice thing about doing 42 debates.
He must have said, I want to see this or that. I want to see your campaign.
He said a couple things.
What's he want you to do?
First and foremost, he said you got to keep doing what you're doing. When you talked about your record in Hollywood, for instance, of turning around those neighborhoods, he said, trust me, I'm a wise guy, I'm an attacker, I'm a good, articulate, former talk show radio guy, I would have taken you apart if any of that stuff were lies. But we fact-checked it, we researched it, and guess what? It was real. And it was one of the reasons why he said, I want to support you. He also said, I want to make sure that you stay independent. That was a really important thing that emerged, I think, in the first round, is that people saw me as independent. Sometimes I've done things that parts of the business community didn't love. Sometimes I've done some things that were difficult for public sector unions, like pension reform. But I think at the end of the day, he realized this is somebody who can be more independent than the other candidate. This is somebody who can actually do the right thing. He said, continue to do that. And I think he wanted to make sure that I would have a broad tent, that it would not be an administration of just a few, but that everybody would have a place. And that's who I am. I like to surround myself with people with diverse opinions, diverse backgrounds. At the end of the day, I'll make that decision, but I want to make sure that somebody with a more conservative voice than me is at the table, maybe somebody with a more liberal voice than me, somebody who comes from a different background, somebody who comes from a different age. Those are what makes a leader, I think, able to make a good decision. If you surround yourself with like-minded or yes men and women, you can't do that, and that was very important to Kevin.
Jan Perry, what was your discussion with her?
With Jan Perry, we talked a lot about the future of the city and what was at stake. I mean, she cares deeply about what happened. She, I think, felt that there's an old adage that you campaign the way you're going to govern. And she was very disappointed in my opponent's way that she campaigned, the way she went after her personally. But more than that, she said, look, you have a very similar track record to me. What you've done turning around Hollywood is similar to what I've done turning around downtown. And I want to know that you're going to continue that momentum of economic development. That was very near and dear to her. And that you're going to take care of South LA, because I think she felt very proprietary, as she should, about her district, about being African American in the race, and that would be an important part of my administration. And we had those discussions. He said it was an easy decision as well.
And Emmanuel Pleytes?
Emmanuel Pleytes was, in some ways, most similar to me. I mean, in terms of, he's 10 years or so younger, but reminded me a lot of, why I got into politics. He was idealistic. He was practical, though, at the same time. Got a lot of youth vote, a lot of Latinos, a lot of areas in South LA.
No, he got 4% of the vote.
But if you look at the breakdown of what he got, it was a similar vote. Yeah. Okay. And so to me, I wanted to see, each one of these candidates came up with good ideas, things I hadn't thought of. And you have to be humble enough to say, hey, Kevin James has a really good idea about how to get cops out from behind the desk doing paperwork for 2/3 of the day once they make an arrest. And what can he do to help me do that? Manuel Pleytes had a goal of reducing our dropout rate by 50%. I think it's a really good metric and something that you can put out there as a number, and I want him to help me kind of develop a plan to do that. Jan Perry, has ideas about how we can keep the city solvent and have real fiscal management. Those are things that I'll draw on. And, it's not exactly a team of rivals, but it's, looking at that old Lincoln model of, look, people who are against you one day can be your best allies and advocates the next one.
Yeah. So after the primary that you came in first, a lot of fundraising, a lot of talking to former candidates and others to get endorsements. And it seems like it's been the endorsement war. Is there anybody out there in LA who hasn't endorsed?
It's crazy, and endorsements are important, but I haven't spent all my time on endorsements. I want to be really clear. We go out there, it doesn't always get covered in the press, but every single week, and almost every day now, we've been doing substance-based press conferences, discussions. I had a small discussion at a beer and hot dog place in Atwater Village with small business owners in Northeast Los Angeles about what's wrong with the red tape in Los Angeles and what can we do to fix it, and a couple programs I've launched and getting feedback of that. Today we are in Hollywood in front of the Technicolor headquarters. Technicolor used to be outside the city of LA. Yeah. We helped them build there, come back. There's 2 other construction projects within a block from there with people working as we speak, even in the midst of a recession. We go out and we do kind of things, whether it's on vocational ed, on education, looking at ways we can get the economy jump-started. They don't always make it into the headlines. They don't always lead the news. And I wouldn't say it's frustrating, but you get home sometimes and say, 2 new endorsements today. And it was, Gruhl had this and Garcetti had that, when the real discussion was an hour of talking with real people about real things. And the endorsements don't come up that much with regular voters. So I really think the only endorsement that really matters is that of a voter. In down ballot races where people don't know the 2 people, say somebody running for assembly, right, those endorsements can make a huge impact. Right. But at the end of the day, I might love, whoever, put them out there, a senator. I might love a former president. I might love a great business person in this city. But I don't need them to broker my decision, because by this time, I'm getting a feeling for the 2 candidates myself. Thank you for your suggestion, thank you for yours, but I like him, I like her. And I think that's why we're ahead, even in the midst of, we showed in the first round with fewer endorsements and less money, usually the tradition is most endorsements, most money means most votes. We upended that arithmetic. And I think people are really hungry for a discussion on results, on real meat, not just on the metrics. I mean, the optics. Excuse me.
We are at Loyola Marymount University having a conversation with Council Member Eric Garcetti, candidate for mayor. He's made the runoff. The election is on May 21st.
That's right.
We want everybody to come out and vote.
It starts earlier than that.
Yeah, well, that's right. We'll talk a little bit about that. But turnout, 21%.
Yeah.
In 2001, 2005, they were competitive elections. 2009 wasn't, but we saw about a 20% increase in the runoff. So that would mean that there would be about a 26, 27% turnout. In 1993, between Reardon and Wu, we saw an 11% increase, or it went to 41% in terms of the runoff. So many of us who watch LA politics and elections expect it to be a higher turnout. It's still going to be low.
Sure.
I mean, we'll be lucky if we hit 30,
Yeah.
but I expect around 26, 27%.
That's right.
What do you think is going to happen in terms of turnout?
I think we'll probably get about 20, somewhere between 25 and 30, that's what I've been saying, and maybe a little bit more towards the lower end of that. I think it's tough. We used to have the elections back then a month later, which it doesn't seem like a big difference, but it used to be, let's see, April and June instead of March and May. And March is so soon after the November elections because essentially you lose the holidays, and then it's really, you campaign for January and February, and then boom, the election. And you know, of course, the absentee ballots start a month earlier. So in some cases, you only have a month to start campaigning before people are filling out their ballots. You know, I think to move that later, or maybe do a June and November election, which people are used to, may help us get more in the future. But I also think it's tough because, you know, if the coverage is only about what endorsements are out there, if the coverage is only about certain, you know, aspects, I think there's been better print coverage. I think that the broadcast coverage on television cameras, by and large, has not really gotten into the meat of the matter.
Is our local democracy broken that only 20% of registered voters come out to vote? I mean, that was basically about 400,000 people in a city of 4 million.
Yeah.
Now, the 4 million include children and many non-citizens as well, but only 400,000 out of 4 million people came out to vote. What's wrong with the system? Is it the voter? Is it the candidates? Is it the mechanics of the electoral system? What is wrong with LA democracy?
It's a couple things. I think one, we don't have a strong civic fabric in general in this town in the same way you see in other cities. There isn't a tradition of kind of engaging in local politics because it's a confusing place. Oh, I live in Santa Monica, can I vote for you? No, that's a different city. It's, you know, people aren't sure with 88 cities all in this county if they always, you know, where they're supposed to fit in and whether they're a voter. Second, I think the timing. You know, you're caught between, it's a little bit of a paradox. You can go into the even year, and a lot of people said, why don't you do this 2014 or 2016? Yeah. Well, you would have greater turnout, no doubt, but you'd also have, the election would be lost in the either gubernatorial or presidential election, so you'd have less probably focus, but more turnout. Or you can do it on a year like this and have less turnout, but more focus. Right. And I also think it's the most important thing for me, and what I'd like to change, if I get elected mayor, one of the legacies I'd like to leave behind, is looking at different ways to vote. You know, why can't we get absentee ballots to everybody? And then people can still vote day of and turn them in someplace in their neighborhood. Why can't we look at maybe doing weekend voting? Right. You know, things that would actually drive up, we should be making it easier. Maybe online voting. There will be a time when we all look back and say, you used to have to go and actually take a pen and fill out who you voted for. Online voting will be, you know, in our own homes, wherever we are, something that we expect, and maybe LA could be at the cutting edge of that.
Students are about to register for classes next semester, and we do it all online. Absolutely. But we used to do it all by hand. Believe it or not, you used to have to line up outside of St. Robert's, and the line was gigantic. Wow. Okay. The year that we changed over to online, students were protesting. Yeah. They thought that we were losing the personal touch. I think personal touch, you're going to stand in line for an hour, that's a personal touch. Yeah. But people are, even young individuals, they like what they're used to, et cetera. So there's going to always be resistance to that. Absolutely. But I got two proposals.
Sure, tell me.
Number one, there ought to be a law. Actually, I propose a statewide constitutional change that every city has to have their elections either in November of the even year or November of the odd year. And that way everybody knows there's an election in November. Yep. And so the LA Times and the media is talking about the mayoral election, but for the vast majority of the people who read the paper or watch TV, it doesn't mean anything because they don't live in LA. Right. But if they knew there was a local election, So then the city of Los Angeles can say, I want to have it during the presidential election or the gubernatorial election, or in 2013, but in November.
Right.
And everybody would know it would be November.
I like
That's recommendation number one.
I like that.
Second recommendation is that we in Los Angeles do what Oakland and San Francisco do, and that is ranked choice voting. Okay? And that is where people, you say, for instance, in the primary, you would rank the people. I would vote for Emmanuel Plaitis first, which I did. Okay, then second for then I would vote for Kevin James second, which I did, and then Jan Perry, and then I stopped voting.
Very smart of him,
Okay.
not giving
And
away
so-
his fourth and fifth.
Okay, so then we would rank choice them, and then we would do the list, and it would obviously show that Plaitis ended up finishing fifth. We would eliminate him, and then whoever voted for him, their second choices would be redistributed.
Right.
And then we would rank them again and then eliminate number 4. I mean, I know you know the system, but I'm just explaining it to the students. And then we would get the winner with only one election.
Yep.
And that's the way Oakland and San Francisco do that. Okay? Do you know if we were to do that in LA, who would have become mayor?
I think me.
Yeah. We actually
Yeah, you did that, right.
we simulated the ranked choice. We asked all our respondents to give us a first, second, third choice, went through the process, and you ended up winning. So I'm sure you would like that system if it were in place.
Sure, in a selfish way I would. I think.
What do you think of that?
For down ballot races, like for a city council race, and there's a compelling argument. A lot of people say it's very expensive to do the second round as well. Like for instance, we've had some community college district votes where you literally have 8% turnout and like 70% of that is absentee votes. I mean, it's really horrible turnout. I like aspects of it, but I also think that there is something to this two-step dance. Like when I ran the first time for city council, or just in my district right now, there I think we're 13 people running. You don't really know yet how to rank. You don't distill down to a couple and then really learn more in depth about those two. So you never really get the chance when there's so. I went to a couple, or I saw a couple forums for the city council seat that I represent now. And when you have 13 people, you can imagine what it's like. They get about 2 seconds each to answer a question. You never get that chance to get a more in-depth discussion. So I think there's elements that you would miss that are important to democracy of distilling it down to 2 and then having them make the case. For a mayor's race, there was a lot of controversy in Oakland too, because a lot of people felt like, somebody who came in first, he stayed there at about 40% each time until this second place person just kept crawling up from 20% and suddenly was mayor. It did reflect that not enough people liked that first place finisher. They either ranked him first or they had him like down at 8.
No,
and so it does get to reflect the strength of opposition. But at the same time, maybe if they had 2 months to kind of debate each other, people would have the chance to make a more informed decision.
Well, I love the system.
Yeah.
It saves money.
But I love the first one. The first
and
suggestion.
it also, it's a different dynamic in terms of the campaign, if you know about in that other system.
Right.
Okay. Just one more set of questions regarding the campaign, and I want to move in terms of public policy.
Sure.
Endorsements. Okay, we've talked a little bit about them, but Wendy Gruhl has gotten the endorsements of many unions. So have you, okay? But part of the criticism of her is that she's gotten endorsements from the unions that are most impacted by the city and city decisions. That is, the unions that represent people who work for the city. Okay, the IBEW that represents mostly the DWP workers, SEIU. But those are endorsements that you wanted, that you went after as well. So isn't it tough to kind of criticize her for getting endorsements that you wanted to get as well?
No, I mean, what I've criticized is the disproportionate
But you
impact
did
of
you did want those endorsements, right?
Well, I didn't chase all of them, but I did compete for SEIU and other ones, and I've gotten some SEIU locals, for instance, when she got, the ones that represent our city workers. I have the janitors and security workers, folks who work at the airport. To me, what I said, regardless of knowing even where the endorsements were going to go long before they did, is I put forward a challenge when I saw some of the kind of super PAC equivalent money, these independent expenditures where people aren't limited to donate $1,300 maximum. What the voters voted in is the system here. To take a pledge that we wouldn't take those monies. This was based on something that came out of Massachusetts when both the Republican and Democrat, Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown, took what was called the People's Pledge. They said, we will reject this money. They couldn't technically turn it away, but what they said is if anybody on our side does spend money on us, we'll take the equivalent of half that much and spend it on our opponent's favorite charity, okay? Now, a lot of people always play innocent, like, these are just my friends, they're independent, I don't know what they're going to do. But when they publicly announced that, just as when President Obama in his first race said, we won't do this, guess what? Your friends listen and they don't do it. It was the only Senate race in the country where there was no super PAC money on television. None. And just like President Obama, when he rejected that in his first race, it didn't happen. People will actually listen to you. So, you know, Wendy Gruhl has been for campaign finance and clean elections on the record many times. So have I, but this was a chance to actually prove it. And she dismissed it as a gimmick. It was not a gimmick. It was something successful. It would have shown that we actually practice what we preach and that we walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So the criticism I've had, it could have come from a single business as well. Chevron could have put $3 million in, but $3 million, we both raised $5 million the old-fashioned way, the way that the voters intended here. But on top of that, she had $3 million led by the DWP union on top of that. And all I said was, these campaigns are not for sale. They are not for sale. They shouldn't be purchased.
But I mean, it's clear she's following the rules. It's clear that these independent expenditures do exist. There's going to be some for you as well. And you guys don't control them, and you can't say anything that they do, right? I mean, and so one can't really, she's following the law when it comes to all of this.
Following the law is one thing, but we have the chance to actually change the ethics of what we do. There's lots of decisions that adhere legally.
President Obama, when it was so overwhelming in terms of the Republican, he ended up with a lot of
no question,
almost as many as the Republicans.
But what they showed in Massachusetts is that the two people can change the rules. And unfortunately, in this case, one person rejected that. They flat out rejected it, and we could have done that, should have done it. Now, I'm not going to take things lying down. I don't think my friends are either, but there's no comparison so far in terms of the number of money. We had, I think, zero, like maybe $1,500 compared to almost $3 million, and yet we came in first place. Right. So I think that the people have a distaste for this as well.
So both the LA County Federation of Labor and the LA Area Chamber of Commerce,
Jobs PAC,
have endorsed Wendy Gruhl. Those guys never agree on anything, okay? But yet they agreed on Wendy Gruhl. Why don't they like you?
I'm very proud not only of the support I have from working people and unions, but also business leaders. I mean, look at Hollywood. The Hollywood Chamber of Commerce endorsed me. They work closely with me. And, you know, I've worked closely with the LA Chamber of Commerce, but I think I have been an independent leader. And that's tough for some people to accept. If you want somebody easier who's going to go along, get along, never do anything controversial, but also not be in the thick of things during difficult moments, you got a choice in this election. But if you want somebody who has been independent, who stepped up on pension reform, who stepped up on things like representing workers for a living wage, who stepped up, you know, sometimes angering some business folks, sometimes angering some labor folks, but who's always done the right thing, then I am your candidate. And I think, you know, the fact that those endorsements were there and are there, and we're leading the polls and came in first, speaks volumes that the average Angelino kind of doesn't want any one powerful group of interests to dominate or to tell them how to vote. They want a mayor who they know is going to be independent enough to sometimes say, hey, look, my friends in the unions, we can't do that. That'll cost us to go bankrupt. Or look, my friends in business, that's not fair. We've got people who can't even support their families. They don't have health care. They don't have a living wage. And I will always plant my flag with my beliefs, whether it is, you know, something that is not necessarily the endorsed position of the Chamber of Commerce, or sometimes that's difficult for us to do when we're about to head off the fiscal cliff like we did with pension reform.
Yeah. So how difficult is it for you as a Democrat, progressive Democrat, I mean, lefty Democrat?
Your words?
Yeah, my words. Total lefty, that so many labor unions are not supporting you.
Oh, it's fine. You know, like, look, it's never easy for friends.
Like that.
It's absolutely fine. It's actually a very liberating thing because I know the members. I know, you know, folks whose union
people you've known
leaders,
for a long time and have supported.
But there's union leaders who say, okay, we're not with you, and then the members come up and say, we love you. Thank you so much for what you did. We know what you have done, and we understand this is politics. And I genuinely don't spend a lot of time, Fernando, being upset that this group or that group isn't with me, because if you spend all your time worried about the endorsements or which group or which outside person has or hasn't endorsed you, you've forgotten what this job is about. This job is about changing people's lives in neighborhoods. This is about solving everyday problems. It's not about collecting a list of whether these folks are going to be on your team for these 3 months or not. I'm going to work great with those folks. When I win, I'm not going to be a sore winner. I need those folks to succeed from labor, from business, from all of these areas. But I'm going to continue to take my case to the people that live in Los Angeles. 99% of people are not affiliated probably with any of these groups. They don't spend any time going to the chamber board meeting. They're not necessarily a leader in a union. They want good things for this neighborhood that they live in. They want to see a good Main Street. They want to see a job for their kids. They want to know their mother or father has senior programs. And when you compare those records, I don't think it comes close. We've tripled the number of parks in my district, been #1 in job creation, cut violent crime by 2/3, done pension reform. So when people look at it, you know, whether or not Magic Johnson or whether Karen Bass has endorsed one of us or the other, what they're really more interested in is what have you done? I stood in a park with Tom LaBonge last week when I was endorsed by him. And it was a park we built together next to the Silver Lake Reservoir, where every afternoon there's kids flying kites, where the community comes together, where the folks who did it with us and realized how hard it was were standing behind us. That is much more powerful testimony, I think, than any kind of big ticket endorsement or any group that is or isn't with you. So of course, it's never fun for friends not necessarily to be with you, but you learn things and you realize that it's going to be a tough job as mayor. You have to be willing to not have your friends with you every step of the way.
Is there any person or organization out there today that hasn't endorsed that?
Oh, sure. There's an infinite number.
No, I know that.
There's supervisors who have endorsed. There's members of Congress who have endorsed.
Who's the top person who hasn't endorsed yet?
I don't know. I mean,
how about Antonio Villaraigosa?
The mayor has not endorsed. Xavier Oslovsky hasn't endorsed. Mike Antonovich hasn't endorsed. There's groups that are still out there that may or may not endorse. But I genuinely think even the mayor, that's an important endorsement on kind of paper. But people are, at this point, kind of making up their minds based on us as candidates and people, not based on the latest name on our list.
Okay, so...
And I think in some ways, if I may, that you're kind of, we fall into this trap that is not where the average voter is. That this is what dominates news coverage. And I'm not just saying this because there's a longer list here than on my side. I mean, we've gone toe to toe. We have lots of endorsements. I'm proud of them. But you know that elections are, does an endorser bring with them an organization? Do they actually bring with them, you know, the ability to fundraise? Do they bring something with them, or is it just a name? For instance, here in this area, you know, I was proud today to announce Ruth Galanter's endorsement, and she's co-chairing West Siders for Garcetti with Mike Bonin, the incoming council member for this area, and Paul Kretz, who's next door.
So Ruth Galanter, she's a professor here at LMU.
Absolutely. I'm looking for a twofer. Can you do it today?
No, it's like unlike Ruth, I don't get involved in politics.
That's very smart of you. That's very smart. But Ruth is somebody that people
That's
respect.
why we hired Ruth, because I'm the theory and she's the practice.
Got it. I mean, Ruth is somebody who is respected here, who's looked at the issues. And the moment that she endorsed me, I can't tell you how many people in this area called and said, count me in, I want to volunteer, I want to step up, I'm going to be calling my neighbors, I just sent out this email, I posted this on Facebook. That's different than just a name.
Do you want the endorsement of the mayor?
Absolutely, sure. I would absolutely welcome the endorsement of the mayor.
Let's role play.
Okay. You want me to be the mayor?
No, I'm going to be the mayor. This is.
It'll be good practice for me.
This is my class.
All right.
Okay. I want to be. I want to be
Antonio. Call me bro. Right?
Okay, yeah. Hey, bro. I can't do that right. I'm Antonio Villaraigosa, the most successful mayor in the history of Los Angeles. Okay. Eric, why should I support you?
Well, I think both of us believe that
I'm not done talking. Let me tell you about my successes.
Yes, of course, Mr. Mayor.
No, go ahead.
No, the things that, first of all, Mr. Mayor, you know what we did together. Through the toughest fiscal times in our lifetime in this city, we took this city, which 4 years ago was projected to be bankrupt in 5 years, off of that fiscal cliff. You couldn't have done it without me as council president. I couldn't have done it without you as mayor. We went in there and we did very difficult things with our allies, with our friends, saying that either we do this or it's going to be worse for you. We're going to lose jobs, we're going to have layoffs, we're going to have deeper cuts in services. And we did that together. So you know my mettle. But second, you also know that I believe in big things just like you. I believe that we should strive for the stars. You have to fix the cracks on the sidewalks before you can lift your head up to those stars. But we should be looking at things like how we get our schools to go from worst in the country to best in the country. How we can look at the worst traffic in America and look at laying the table for a transportation revolution here, where we can take our streets and reimagine them by closing them down and having 150,000 bicyclists on them, where we can look at putting money where it's needed, not just spreading it evenly in 15 council districts like fiefdoms. For instance, for crime prevention, the work that we did to take summer night lights, a program that now keeps our parks open until midnight, to save lives in our toughest neighborhoods so that kids in the summertime have a place to be. That's the work I'm going to continue, and that's the work I'm going to build on. A lot of the stuff that you've done has laid the table, but now it's time to eat. It's time to get in there and actually do that next phase of the work. And every mayor is different than the last one, but one can work closely with the mayor who came before, and I think respect that mayor who comes after.
All right, bro, I'll get back to you. I got to go talk to Wendy.
You have a state of the city to do it now.
Yeah. I know I said it kind of facetiously, but I do think he's going to go down as one of the great mayors. Okay, when you take a look at crime, the crime rates continue to decline again. 10,000 cops.
Yep.
Okay, are you as mayor going to keep the 10,000 cops?
Oh, that's as much, my legacy is his legacy and something that I feel as deeply as he does, so absolutely. I was on, LA Times reported this last week, I think, that I was on Navy duty. I'm an officer in the reserve component of the United States Navy, and I was doing my active duty in 2009. I was stationed in Rhode Island for a war game exercise.
That's not Afghanistan or Iraq.
No,
I
it's
wouldn't
not.
say I was stationed in Rhode Island.
No, it's okay. Listen to the story.
Okay.
So I was doing the 12.
Oh, you're going to tell us that Rhode Island is as dangerous as Afghanistan?
No, absolutely not. From 12 midnight to 8 a.m. I was taking the midnight shift. And there was rumblings that my council, while I was gone, a couple members were going to say, maybe we should stop, at the beginning of the recession, stop hiring for attrition. In other words, the 10,000 cop goal, we were a little under that, would go down and down and down. And I used my frequent flyer miles that I had left, and I got on a plane a couple hours after I ended my shift, flew back here, saved that to make sure we kept that momentum, even in tough budget times, and then flew back to make it in time for my next shift during that 2-week period that I was on duty. I mean, I only bring up that story not to compare it to Afghanistan at all, but to say that, this is how deeply I feel about it. That the work that I have done in my own district, for instance, we cut violent crime by 2/3. In Hollywood, I think all crime was down 60%. That means people feel safe. We just did a press conference there this morning. And folks, one guy who owns a restaurant there was saying, this was a place that nobody would come and eat at my restaurant 10 years ago. Now they feel safe on the streets, and that's our legacy.
Would you propose to increase it beyond 10,000? Because Wendy has talked about an additional 2,000 cops.
Yeah, no, I think that's irresponsible to say right now. Because A, we're still trying to close that last bit of the budget deficit. But secondly, if we have additional monies, and I think we will see some in the coming years, I would put it into overtime right now for existing police officers. We have detectives we're literally sending home who know that they're on to solving a case, but because of the limits of the budget right now, we're sending them home. Instead of adding another employee and another pension and another health care plan, I'd rather give them that overtime, solve some of those cases that we're seeing the clearance rate go down, meaning fewer crimes are being actually solved, and put that into the cops today.
Okay, Mayor Villaraigosa is giving his State of the City address,
yes,
and he's going to talk about crime and how, I mean, it really is remarkable. And I know it's happening all over urban America, but it's happening
not as deeply as here.
Not as deeply as here. So would you keep Charlie Beck?
Yes, Charlie Beck, I think, has been a very good leader. I mean, he'll come up for his renewal in a couple of years, and I'll have a process, an open process for that. And one of the things I've said is I'd like to, as I come in as mayor, ask all my general managers to reapply for their positions. Now, the police chief is protected by the police commission, so he'd be the one exception, so he'd be in place, and I support him. But I think it's very important for the mayor. I don't remember, essentially your general managers are your cabinet. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why in Los Angeles, with the power to hire and fire those general managers, no mayor ever does kind of bring in a lot of new people. President Obama didn't say to President Bush, why don't you leave behind your cabinet? President Bush didn't say that to Clinton. But he didn't say leave them all there. No. I mean, in place, he brought in his own people. He kept the defense secretary. I think that was the only one. But yeah. This is our chance to really define our administration. And I'll hire, I think, many of them back. We've got some extremely talented people. But I want the public to see, who's running the libraries, rec and parks, fire department, these key things that are really, these are your general managers. I want to open that process up. But in terms of the police chief, he's done, I think, a very good job in tough times. And there are a lot of cities where you're seeing the crime rate tick up. And in a recession, it's traditional that you see crime rate go up. And last year, we're the safest big city in America in terms of violent crime.
Okay, so I would give Antonio Villaraigosa an A when it comes to crime. Okay, I'd give him an A in terms of transportation, even though we're still stuck in gridlock, et cetera, but given what he's done. I'd give him an A in education, even though he doesn't control it, et cetera. I would give him an A in environment, given what he's done with the DWP, the harbor, et cetera. In those areas, crime, education, transportation, environment, where do you disagree with the mayor?
I don't know that I do in those areas. I think that in crime, we've worked very closely and are very aligned with the importance of investing to prevent and intervene in crime. But I would build on that to also look at reentry. I think that's a new problem he didn't face as much, but he's starting to with people coming out of our prisons with realignment and coming out of jail. So
realignment is the state sending
now as people come out, they're not the responsibility of the state, they're the responsibility of the local government.
So we had Sheriff Baca here last week, and he made reference to that.
Instead of parole officers, probation officers. I think on the environment, I mean, we've worked extremely closely, and many of the initiatives that the mayor has launched were ones that I've been working on as well for 12 years. The largest green building ordinance in the city's history we did together. A feed-in tariff, which is a way of putting solar panels all over our rooftops, which is just going to be starting now to make us really the solar capital, I think, of the country.
Just to mention that we have solar panels on this building for over 20 years, so we're at the leading edge here.
That's Loyola Marymount doing it again.
That's right.
And Fernando Guerra installed them himself.
I broke a few of them when I was up there, but it's like...
And but I think there's new work to do. For instance, trying to get to a zero waste city.
So in those areas, he's done a remarkable job. Where do you disagree with the mayor?
So I like that you got to give him the A's, and now you're going to ask me for the other ones.
Exactly.
Where do I disagree with the mayor? There's a different context for the next mayor. It's not so much an issue of disagreement. It's one thing to lay the foundation, for instance, for the transportation change, but as you said, traffic hasn't improved here. Right. I think the next mayor is going to have to be more of an implementer, which isn't a criticism. When I've said that before, people say, oh, are you saying he doesn't implement? No, he's queued up and passed, for instance, with many of us, Measure R, to get the money in place, but now somebody has to do the hard work of getting the Crenshaw line built, of bringing, finally, rail to the airport, of doing something through the valley that would be north-south along the 405. So that's going to be the new work. I think he's done the right things in balancing the budget, and we work closely. So I don't think there's a lot of areas of disagreement that we have with each other. I just think it's going to be a new role. And plus I bring some new programs, some new vision, things that he hasn't done. And like for instance, the role of technology in government. I want to take, for instance, with traffic. We have, and he's helped us get this, we have now sensors throughout the city on all of our traffic information. We've now have the ability to synchronize all of our lights. Remember when Netflix, just last year, did the Netflix Prize, offering $1 million to whoever could come up with a better algorithm for recommending movies to their customers. So you had teams around the world that were competing to come up with this. One of them did. It was a better algorithm, and they got $1 million. I'd love to, for instance, with traffic, take all this data, get some private and foundation money to put $1 million out there and say, any group of students, any group of engineers, any university that wants to come up with what we can do with that data to improve traffic in the city, you got $1 million. And it would be a worldwide competition to take the traffic capital of America and improve things.
But you can't use your handheld device. The court's just ruled that
Absolutely. That's right.
You can't be looking for traffic information or anything else. It's like the same as texting and or using the phone. How different will a Garcetti administration be than a Villaraigosa administration? How would we look at the difference?
Well, there's a few things that I would change. One, I mentioned before, general managers, I'd ask them all to reapply for, and I want them to have real metrics in terms of what are your goals? I don't know how to judge our general managers quite often now because they don't say, I'm going to, reduce traffic by X amount. I'm going to provide this many jobs. I'm going to make it half the time to open a business up in Los Angeles. And I like the idea of numerical goals. I want to talk to the new general managers that I'll bring in or the ones that I'll rehire about really putting that out there so that voters can judge me whether I'm successful and I can judge them whether they're successful. I think you're going to see people who are coming in from around the city and around this country that will come into government in a kind of real sense of excitement about using technology, changing systems. I'm going to be out there working in the neighborhoods, and I don't just mean showing up necessarily for community events, but I'm going to work out of Van Nuys City Hall every month or two. I'm going to work out of San Pedro City Hall every month or two. It's really important in a city this spread out. I've learned that in the campaign. You can't just come for the occasional media event. They need to know that you're there. I'm going to have office hours like I've done as a council member where people can line up and meet the mayor.
I have office hours that never show up unless it's right after the midterm.
Exactly, that's an important time. So, you know, that sort of, and then also one last thing, I'm going to be walking door to door. I've done that as a council member for 12 years. So if somebody gets a knock on the door and the mayor's suddenly there saying, hey, how am I doing and what can I do to help you out more, don't be surprised.
Okay. If the students, if anybody has a question, you can come up here and we'll ask the council member to take a look at your question. So, you know, there's always this crazy 100 days after you're inaugurated, and it's an arbitrary number, but it's always a nice round number. What will happen 100 days into the Garcetti administration?
100 days is a very short period of time, but I think you'll begin to have some rebuilding of a deeper faith in government. I think the idea that the mayor is going to be accessible directly in those office hours and those walking door to door and those working in the neighborhoods. I think you're going to see some technological changes. I'm going to hire a chief technology officer in the first 100 days. We're a $10 billion entity without a chief technology officer. It's mind-boggling. A chief information officer that begins to market our city better, whether it's for international tourists and investors or whether it's for businesses that are here to stay here. And you're going to see a vision of where the city's going to be headed. So for instance, when we talked earlier about Silicon Beach, you know, this is a startup city all of a sudden. It's one of the 3 top startup cities for new businesses in the world right now. I think Silicon Valley is rated #1, Tel Aviv and Israel #2, and then LA is #3 right now. And I've watched mayors, for instance, like Mayor Bloomberg, who see the power of the narrative to say, this is the kind of city we're going to have. And people begin to come to that almost like a magnet. You know, New York was never a technology city, for instance, and he said that a couple of years ago. Every big company now, Facebook, Google, they're like, I got to have an office in New York. He said it's going to be the filming capital of America, and they're stealing filming from Los Angeles, and I'm going to fight back, hire a film czar in the first 100 days. People that will begin to be in those core industries. But I also want to lastly have in those first 100 days, have a new sense of civic participation, volunteerism, engagement, and create a platform to make that easy. If somebody wants to get engaged in a school, they can go to our city website and figure out how to do that and connect directly with a classroom teacher. If they want to create a park, we're going to tell them what groups are actually there. I've tripled the number of parks in my district. I want to see a park within walking distance of everybody in LA, but I can't do it alone. Right. So I think that's the biggest change you'll see in the first 100 days.
You know the biggest criticism that people have of you?
Tell me.
Well, what do you think it is?
I don't know. I hear different things out there.
Well, what's one of them?
Well, sometimes people say, are you too nice? That was the biggest criticism when we did a debate.
Like the other thing about...
Dan Schnur said that. They said, you're too nice to be mayor. And I said, well, first of all, my mother would be very happy to hear that. But secondly...
I don't think you're too nice to be mayor. I don't know about the nice thing. Yeah, you are a nice guy, but, you know... okay, well,
tell me,
what
I
else?
don't know.
Well, that you can't make a decision and that you waffle. And that as an executive, you're going to have to say, this is the way we're going to do it, okay? And so the insiders of City Hall and others who follow LA politics, that's their major concern. That you say, I'm going to do something, and then that you come back and say no. Now, well, I'll let you respond to that.
Well, I would say it's just not true, and it's actually reflected in the endorsements that I've received in the last few weeks of my colleagues. Well, hear me out for a second. So my colleagues who work with me, who would be those people who would know most intimately.
So there's 15 council members, you're one of them, so the other 14.
Paul Koretz just endorsed me. Paul Krikorian had just endorsed me. Tom Laban just endorsed me. Joe Buscaino just endorsed me. And what they said was quite the opposite, actually. They said, look, we haven't always agreed with Eric.
So there's 15 council members, not counting of the, which council member has not?
There's 14 right now.
Of the 14 council members, well, not counting you then, there's 13.
Right, exactly, there's 13.
Of the 13 council members, who has not endorsed?
There's only one that is not endorsed at all, and that's Councilmember Englander. And there's 2 that have endorsed my opponent, and all the rest are with me.
So you have 10-2-1.
Right.
Okay.
10-2-1. I think that's correct. So you know, when you look at the work that we did, they said, look, as council president, he made us do some really tough stuff that sometimes we didn't agree with. This person wanted to cut more, or lay a lot more people off. This person said, well, let's not do any pensions at all.
Where does that criticism come from?
It's always an impossible thing to correct an abstract criticism. I can just give you the concrete examples and their testimony, which I think is the most powerful. Paul Koretz said the other day, judge a guy in 2 ways. One, by the people who work around him, and the opponents that he's had. I got the endorsement of all 3 opponents in the race, and he said, and the bulk of council members know both of these people, have worked with both of them. If they felt that way, they wouldn't have endorsed me.
So, any questions?
How are you, sir? Thanks for coming with us.
Absolutely. Tell me your name.
I'm sorry?
What's your name?
Brendan Hughes.
Thanks, Brendan.
Hey,
Junior political science.
Notice he called you sir.
Yeah,
so,
no, I think he was talking to you.
No, that's not, you
Dr.
can't be
Guerra is
too.
my boss. So. Quick question.
Absolutely.
Briefly. How do you plan to deal with the homeless issue we have? It's an increasing problem.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked it, and we talked about this the first time around. And you know, I've said very clearly in this campaign, I don't want to manage or just reduce homelessness. I want to end it in Los Angeles. And some have said, well, that's too bold a goal. It's impossible. And I reject that. We're not going to end that anybody would ever be on the street, let me be clear, but we can end chronic homelessness in Los Angeles. And other cities have done it. New York City in the 80s, and I was in college in New York in the late 80s, early 90s, worked a lot on homelessness. They completely, basically solved homelessness, street homelessness in New York City. And we know how to do it here. The United Way has put a plan forward. We in my own district in Hollywood have implemented a program called Hollywood Forward, which takes the people that are living on the streets or that are homeless and doesn't just assign them a statistical number. We actually know their names, we interview them, I've done this myself, and learn their stories. Who's a veteran, who's not, has substance abuse issues, who has mental health care needs. And then we've built housing that has services at the housing. Because in the past, we'd put people in apartments, but then they'd fall back out on the streets because we'd never deal with the demons they have, the substance abuse issues, or whatever. Or we give people services on the street, which keeps them alive, but they never get off the street. We have about 170-something formerly homeless individuals that we've taken off the street in Hollywood. And as far as we can tell so far, and we keep pretty good track, not one of them is back on the street after 2 years, which is an incredibly high success rate, obviously. I want to do that citywide. And it costs us more to keep the homeless on the streets today. I mean, one emergency room visit can cost us $20,000 for the year. It's $20,000 in a weekend. It's $6,000 a year to keep somebody in housing with supportive services. So I can make the kind of very, fiscally conservative argument that even if you don't care about the homeless, and I know that you and I do and everybody in this room does, but even if you didn't, it's better for the taxpayer to actually go this route. And I've worked very closely with the Obama administration to get more VASH vouchers, which are homeless vouchers for our veterans. Give you really startling statistics of your peers. Of the students that are at Los Angeles City College right now who are veterans, over 60% of them are homeless. They're in school, they're college students, they've served this country, and they're homeless. Now, they might not be on the street homeless, but they're in a car, they're in a storage unit, whatever it is. That's embarrassing. That's tragic. And so, when I boil down, somebody asked me once, what are your top 5 things that you want to say you look back and have done? That's one of them, to end chronic homelessness in Los Angeles.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, Mr. Garcetti.
How you doing?
Thank you for that internship after the last debate.
Absolutely.
For emailing Annie and
Absolutely.
Sally. It's kind of weird asking your boss a question, but anyway.
Nice to see you.
I had the opportunity of meeting former Mayor Hahn and former Mayor Reardon today
Yes.
over the LA's Best.
Oh, nice,
how
great.
they have expanded it from
Yep.
25 schools to 189 schools, and how Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa has been big in implementing the growth and that change. If you were elected mayor, how would you continue to grow that program?
Mm-hmm.
And I was a part of that program as a kid, and I do want to say it does really impact gang reduction.
Yeah, no question. And
I think it started under Bradley, didn't it?
it did, yeah. It started originally under Mayor Bradley, and it has been an extremely successful program, together with other programs. For instance, LA's Best, cuts off after elementary school, and in my district there's something called Lacers, which I didn't start, but is Jackie Goldberg, my predecessor, did, which takes middle school students. And when we looked in my district, we found that there were some great schools that had LA's Best, and some other after-school. Beyond the Bell is one of the after-school programs that LAUSD has, but many schools had no after-school program at all. And so I think it's not too high of a goal to set that every school in Los Angeles have an after-school program. If we can do it through LA's Best, great, but it'd probably be a combination of a few different ones that also do really excellent work. Because the difference between whether or not there's a place to go after school and not is night and day. I mean, the impact it had in your life, as you said, it was probably something that helped you hang on in really tough times. And for all of us to see that, the schools used to be the center of our community. It used to be something we all had a responsibility. But we've turned these schools into islands now, where like the city is like, oh, I'm not supposed to touch a school. Well, why can't we use city funds like LA's Best in schools? Or I've gone even a step further and built ball fields and parent centers and college preparatory programs and stuff with city money And a lot of people at City Hall criticized me for it because they said, well, that's the school district's responsibility. I said, well, since when has a school not been the responsibility of all of us? And so I would continue to use our anti-poverty dollars to put more and more of them into programs like after-school programs that really do save lives and transform lives. And I think it's not too big of a goal to say every school should have one. So
we mentioned and we began with talking about 42 debates during the primary.
Yes.
Was there, that's a lot of debates, a lot
Sure
of
is.
talking. Was there anything that you said that you regretted during that time?
I don't think so.
You
I don't think so.
You didn't have a single blunder?
Well, I'm sure I had blunders, but I don't think necessarily, I can't, there's so many that like probably it's been washed out by now. No, I mean, I liked that we brought up issues, but we didn't make personal attacks. I liked that we were able to actually discuss things and hear from our fellow colleagues. Like there was a good idea from every other opponent that I had. I'm sure there was, but.
What was Wendy Gruhl's good idea?
You know, Wendy's, let's see, I mean, I think some of the work she's talked about in education is good. I mean, she played a role in helping LA's Best. She was just starting out in the mayor's office, and that was something good that she's worked on. You know, I think some of the work that she's done, you know, as a city council member, we worked together, for instance, the work we did on business tax reform. I agree with that. You know, that was something that was very important for us to do, and I'd like to take it further and get rid of our city's business tax. You know, Kevin James.
Which is obviously very difficult to do, though. I mean, how would you fill the hole?
Well, it's always a false question, because we've shown when we've reduced it, we actually bring more taxes in. You bring more companies when you get rid of that.
I don't buy that.
Well, the empirical evidence, and I know you're a social scientist, shows otherwise. It really does.
That reminds me of the old Reagan-Laffer curve,
No.
supply-side economics.
I agree, and that's that. A lot of people have said that, but I think it's, and I'm not saying you're doing this because you brought it up.
Said that.
It's a sloppy kind of intellectual slide to go that way, because then the flip side, you can say, well, every tax is a good one. No reduction of tax
No,
ever
not
has an
every tax
impact.
is a good one.
This one is a stupid tax. I've said this in the LA Times. I said there's such things as smart taxes and stupid taxes. To be #1 in a competitive environment of 88 cities, to be the very highest of 88, I guarantee you talk to any accountant in the city, when they're talking to somebody about incorporating, if they can, they say, use my P.O. box in Beverly Hills, do it in Calabasas. Folks who are I talked to a guy who owns a lot of commercial property the other day. He said, all of our guys in the valley are saying, can't you just get us over the border into Thousand Oaks? It really does have an impact on people's decisions.
I agree that it's a stupid tax, but it's a tax that produces $400 million for the general budget.
Well, I'll give you an example. In Hollywood,
That's a lot of money.
new car dealers, we had 150 of them in the past.
Right.
There are 50 left. 50 of them left. It's not that we're not buying cars anymore, but they all moved right across the border because the margins are thin, so you go to Santa Monica, Culver City,
but that was also
someplace else.
the fiscalization of land, where there were incentives by those cities through redevelopment agencies to basically give away the land.
Most of the car dealers I've talked to, that impacted some of the big box stores, but for the new car dealers, you talk to the New Car Dealers Association, they said no. I mean, they're only earning about 1% anyway, so if you're taking away half of that profit, half of it, they're not going to be in the city of LA.
I'm not convinced.
So
I disagree with you
finish,
and Wendy on that.
Well, let me finish one thing with that. So we changed the law this year, right?
Okay.
Mitch Englander and I did. There are 7 new car dealers that are either being built or have moved back in the city of LA. Those 7 car dealers, when you sell a new car, that goes where the person lives.
Right.
But used car sales and all the parts and all the jobs do come to the city where it's located. 7 of them will more than pay for what we lost in all of the 50 that were still left in the city's business tax. So it actually will net us more having changed that.
So has there been anything that you regretted during the campaign so far?
No, I hate to, I know you're looking I've actually been really pleased with the campaign we've run. I've been really pleased that we have kept things, I think, on the issues, and keep elevating it about what the future of Los Angeles is. And we've kept to our plan.
Okay.
We've stuck with that.
So here's the other major criticism of you and Controller Gruhl, is that, contrary to actually some of the things that you said today, that you haven't provided a grand vision for the city, that you haven't really energized or mobilized the electorate, that there's something missing, that there's a spark missing. How do you respond to that?
It's pretty clear to me that people don't want you to start with a grand vision and don't trust if you start with a grand vision. They're still getting to know us. I know, people know me in my district really well, but there's 14 other districts in this city, and they're just beginning to get to know me, just beginning to get to know Controller Gruhl. And for me, it's really important for us to be able to show what we've done. This is a job interview. It's not a presidential campaign. It's mayor. People across the board, and we've even seen the polling that reflects this, especially in the Latino community, African American community, fix my stuff. Fix that basic neighborhood problem. Pave the streets. And then we can have a bigger vision discussion. But I don't trust anybody in office if you come in and say, hey, here's my grand plan for an interconnected transportation system and self-driving cars and an airport that's double-decker where planes land on
now
one
you're
side.
Talking.
And those things, I think people who know me and have seen me over the last 12 years know that I'm pretty good at setting big vision. I can certainly talk about it, and I have always inserted that into the campaign, but it's more important to show that the small things lead to big change. I couldn't think about a big vision. If I had said in Hollywood or Silver Lake 12 years ago, my grand vision is blank, we probably wouldn't have gotten where we did. But if we started focusing on, oh my God, that block has had street prostitutes there for 20 years and drug dealers, what are we going to do to really root it out? That empty lot has been there for 50 years. Can we turn that into a community garden? Hey, Silver Lake is seen as too low income to have a farmer's market, but let's bring one anyway. Those things literally were probably more responsible for huge transformation than if I'd come down with a top-down vision. And it is probably the most instructive thing for me in this campaign to know as mayor that that's where the work is going to begin and end every single day.
So will it change though when you become mayor? Will you, like Antonio Villaraigosa said, subway to the sea, and he's been working on that. And then I want 10,000 officers, and I'm going to make LA the cleanest big city in America.
And we put a lot of that out there.
Those are major.
Hey, I put the vision out there, 20,000 green jobs, and been very specific about how to do that. Getting us off of coal and nuclear power, that's a huge vision thing and not an easy thing to do. A 20 streets, great streets program that mirrors what I've done in my district to take the main backbone of each neighborhood throughout the city of Los Angeles and really rebuild them from that main street that in many neighborhoods has kind of fallen apart. Looking at making sure that we have a world-class port, getting us close to on-dock rail, which means you can take goods right off the ships, right onto rail and get them out of here cleanly, reduce the air pollution, and do very well for competitiveness. Those sorts of things I've been putting out there very consistently. An education program, which we are the first large school district in the country that offers computer coding classes to every kid that wants in the worst schools. I mean, the factory job doesn't exist anymore in the same way that their parents might have gone and built fighter jets. But if you graduate from high school knowing how to code, I guarantee you you're going to get snapped up by somebody from Silicon Beach instead of us importing them from another state. So those are big vision things. Doing Silicon South, that's a big vision issue. And I'll continue to put those out there. But at the end of the day, people want to know, first and foremost, tell me what you've done, show me how you can do it, and if you can take care of those little things, I'll trust you on the big ones.
Okay, just two more questions,
Sure.
and I'm going to let you go. Number one, the pledges. I know you've made a lot of pledges to the electorate at large, to the citizens of Los Angeles, but have you made any pledges to individual groups?
I don't like kind of the written pledge. I think it's something that's generally kind of bad.
Anything?
I don't know. I might have early in the campaign, maybe when you're talking about regrets. I try to say, look, I'm always going to do the right thing. Tell me what you are. I'll say publicly where I am. But locking people in, we've seen that in national politics is kind of a bad thing.
Right.
You lose your own
Totally
ability to think independently. But there's a lot of promises that I've made, that I've put out there. And one of the things we've done, for instance, is make questionnaires that groups ask us to fill out. Yeah. Let's say the Sierra Club, which has endorsed me, asked me to fill out things. National Organization for Women, which endorsed me, asked us about a lot of things, is to put those out there.
So
because many times that's
once
kept.
you fill them out, you make them public. So
and we're looking at putting those up on our website because when people do say, hey, it's time for more issues, all they're talking about is their latest endorsement. I want people to see how long we've thought about these issues. I want them to know that we have a parallel team to the campaign that is just doing policy ideas. Because you only have 6 weeks when you win. You don't know whether you're going to win or lose, but I wanted to be prepared. So I started 1.5 years discussions ago about a green agenda, about an education agenda, about a business agenda. And we have those kind of rocking and rolling and ready to go from some of the best minds, even people who haven't endorsed me. I say, who cares if you endorse me or not? I want your ideas there.
One last question.
Yes.
Who's going to win on May 21st?
I'm going to win on May 21st with the help of all the folks that are here, with your viewers. But I don't take it for granted. I mean, I may have come in first place. I may be polling well now. But all that matters is election day. I don't take for granted one moment that we are going to win this race automatically. But I do think when people look at who's the independent and most accomplished and most visionary candidate that's in this race. We're going to win. We're going to inspire the city. We're going to get back to the basics, make the city work again, and then the real fun will begin July 1st when I'm sworn in as your next mayor.
All right, Eric Garcetti.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.